Welcome to What Drives You. I'm Kevin Miller. I've spent a lifetime performing and producing and doing, and now I'm seeking how to be, how to find peace and fulfillment and my full potential as a human. So I investigate and I contemplate and I educate on human potential, and I share it here. I don't want mere happiness. I want to find true joy, peace, and fulfillment in every day. So not long ago, I saw a video from Dr. Mark Hyman, one of the most well-known, respected names in functional medicine, somebody I follow. And he was talking about struggling with this aspect of his health. So he took a test and found stool test actually, found he was missing a vital bacteria in his gut called akkermansia. And he found no available supplement that provided it. So he went to work doing best he could with some foods and was able to actually improve his levels. But the video I saw was with him and the founder of a company called Pendulum, a biotech company, who's now providing the first akkermansia supplement. So I, of course, right away talked with my friend and Dr. Randy James, functional medicine expert, about it. He said, yeah, it's a pretty exciting new product. So I started taking the product, and on this show here now, I've brought on Pendulum, the company, their chief medical officer, because it's Dr. Adam Perlman, and that's somebody I've known of for a long time from his work with the Mayo Clinic. He's actually director of integrative health, or was director of integrative health and wellbeing at Mayo Clinic, Florida. And he's also vice president for health and wellness for the Duke University Health System, overseeing Duke's Integrative Medicine and Diet Center as well. So again, I knew the guy. Now here he is as he's chief medical officer of this new company, providing the supplement that Mark Hyman's talking about. So you'll hear that I started off, as I do with everyone, just curious about his own journey, what drove him as a medical doctor to then turn to functional and integrative medicine. And then we hit on some key issues just around wellness, especially in America. And then I did quiz him about this new supplement with akkermansia. And they've got a few things, but actress Halle Berry, most people know, she's a big proponent. So you're going to be seeing her all over the place talking about this, because she says this is one of the primary anchors for her health, and she actually battles diabetes as well. But then again, I saw Mark Hyman talking about it, and then heard Peter Attia, both these guys have some of the biggest health and wellness podcasts in all of podcasting. So I talk about, kind of geek out with him on, okay, tell me about this akkermansia, this bacteria we're supposed to have in our gut. They've also got Pendulum, this company, and I'm taking it. They've got this GLP-1 probiotic that's having significant results with people in helping a lot of things, but also abating hunger instead of the new pharma options. We actually didn't spend a ton of time talking about that aspect of it, but they're actually running ads on the show, so you'll probably hear that. And speaking of that, so as part of doing this show, Pendulum is offering 20% off your first probiotic membership. You can get it if you go to pendulumlife.com/drivesyou. And that's spelled PENDULUM life.com/drivesyou. So this is episode 1477. We've had over 70 million downloads now. Thanks for being here. If you're new, we keep having a lot of new people come, and I'm grateful that you're here, you're listening. Thanks for listening to the ads. I mean, we do have sponsors. That's what makes it possible for us to produce 5 free shows every week. And I've had more of you contacting me about being a peak potential guide in your life. You can check out how I can work with you at kevinmiller.co. All right, so drive with me. This is Dr. Adam Perlman, and we're talking again. We hit wellness in America. We talk about Halle Berry's diabetes and Dr. Mark Hyman's healing with this akkermansia. And again, if you're interested in looking at the products, go to pendulumlife.com/drivesyou. Well, Dr. Perlman, as soon as I saw your information come across my desk and your involvement with functional medicine and the people you were involved with, and I saw you connected, with Mark Hyman and with Dave Asprey and these guys who I respect and revere, I was interested in seeing your story. You worked at the Mayo Clinic. I've had a kid that's gone to Mayo Clinic, and I said, that's a guy I want to talk with. So thanks for being here with us today. I'm eager to get into your story.
Yeah, that's great. I'm really thrilled to be on your podcast. Love what you're doing. Love the message you're putting out there, and thrilled to be here.
My friend who we just talked about, Randy James, I wish he was here today. I'd have him hop on the camera and say hi. He's down at the other office. But as he's a medical doctor, but then as a functional medicine devotee, he says, man, the medical doctors specifically that he meets that are then involved with or get involved with functional medicine or integrative medicine, he said they always have a story. And he generally finds either they or someone they were involved with, a loved one, a family member, somebody had something going on that wasn't being taken care of. And that's what took them down their route. So with that, tell me how you got from medical school into this avenue.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. My story may be a little different because my story really probably began when I was 16 and I started to study martial arts. And I think back then, what I remember is a friend asked me, there was a school nearby, hey, did I want to go? And I was interested in doing it. I've been thinking about it. And I then began to train. I trained for, 25 years, owned a school for a while. And I really learned that after the few years of kind of the kick and punch, what kept me going was this idea of challenging myself and exploring a potential inside of myself. So sometimes when I give a presentation related, to sort of functional medicine and this whole concept of how do we really help people to optimize their vitality, explore potential inside of themselves, which is different from what we're talking about today, but things you talk about all the time on your podcast.
Yeah.
I show this picture of me, jumping when I was, I think, 19, about 6 feet in the air, and my foot's at the level of this guy's head. And God knows I couldn't do that now. But I show the picture to say, what was the point? It's not even a very practical self-defense skill. Most people aren't doing, 6-foot jump side kicks on the street or defend themselves. It's certainly, maybe if I continued as a teacher of martial arts, then it's a marketable skill. But other than that, it's probably, maybe Cirque du Soleil or something when you can kind of be able to jump like that.
Yeah.
What I realized, and it actually took me a few years to realize this, but I realized that what really motivated me and kept me in the martial arts was this idea of exploring a potential. What did it take to get there? How many hours did I need to practice? How much determination? And if I could do that, having come into the school at 16, maybe I would have able to jump 2 feet in the air. If I set my mind to it, what else could I accomplish? I really enjoyed what I was doing and teaching martial arts, but I was interested in something more and got very fascinated as well with things that were coming from other healing traditions that I was learning about or studying, like Qigong or Tai Chi. And I was seeing a lot of my students get healthier. They were coming in maybe for self-defense, but their low back pain went away or other things. And decided I'd go to medical school. I actually had to do my pre-med, post-baccalaureate. It was tough, so I graduated. I hadn't done any of the pre-med. But I went knowing that I wanted to try to do more of this integration. The term integrative medicine didn't even exist then. For your listeners, it's really this idea of, in a very patient-centered way and really partnering with patients, how do we help people to get the best answers for them, often looking beyond purely conventional approaches. It's including conventional approaches, but it's also looking beyond to things like massage or acupuncture, appropriate dietary supplements. So that's what I was very interested in because I felt it offered a broader opportunity for people to realize this potential inside of themselves for greater health, greater quality of life, greater vitality. So a lot of what I was doing was lifestyle medicine, but I wanted to do it from within the conventional system because
Adam, that's what I wanted to ask about because I'm hearing you talk and I would say, well, I don't know that medical school, why did that take your interest? Because those things you're talking about don't exist there. I try to be compassionate towards the traditional healthcare system because there are things that there have been. Last September, about a year ago from this recording, I had the greatest accident that I've ever had in my life on a big mountain bike epic thing and broke 7 bones, partially collapsed the lung. And man, the American traditional medical system, they're great for that. They can put you back together and fix you and get me walking out the door. And they did that. However, to have them promote the health that I have at the age of 53 to go out there on an epic mountain bike adventure, that's not what they do. They don't maximize my potential. They take care of the things that are broken, it seems like. So here you are talking about potential, and I wouldn't think medical school, if I was your buddy back then, I'd say, and knowing what I know now, I'd say, I don't know if you want to go to medical school, go to something else. But you're saying you wanted to come at it from inside that.
I did. I mean, I think I pondered for a moment getting my degree in Oriental medicine,
Yeah.
and may have really enjoyed that. But I had exposure to conventional medicine. My father was a hospital administrator at one point, and so I thought, you know what, I'm interested in trying to transform the system and see what I can do, what small contribution I can make towards that transformation. And, you're right in what you say. I mean, if you have trauma, if you want cutting edge cancer treatments, or you need surgical procedures, we're phenomenal. We're not as good with the preventive medicine side of things. And, 80% of what drives the cost of healthcare today are these chronic diseases that people are dealing with, from diabetes to high blood pressure, chronic kidney disease. And the majority of those conditions are by and large at least partially preventable or even treatable with taking a more holistic approach and focusing more on lifestyle. Again, not typically to the exclusion of medications. I'm not suggesting that, but I'm just saying that, with the right kind of lifestyle interventions, very often we can limit reliance on medications, and for some people, avoid them altogether.
We had, I don't know, a few months ago had Dr. Tom Bryant on the show. I don't know if you know Tom, but his focus is right now is inflammation. And he had the inflammation equation is his docu-series that's going on. And, looking primarily, I would say, foods not to eat. Don't eat these, inflammatory foods, the things that are causing problems. So got that. And so we look at food, and I'm the kind of person who think, okay, I'm going to figure out how to eat perfect. I'm going to grow I would say I grow my food. I live up at 9,200 feet, man. We can't grow anything up here. But grow my food and eat organic and eat perfect. And yet it's frustrating realizing that I can't get the nutrients that I need, or two, I realize that with, gut issues and whatnot, I can't assimilate what nutrients I even get in there. I can't get them into my system. And that's frustrating to think that we can't do it. Like we want to be natural, and yet we're pretty limited, especially especially in America, though. I don't know if there's any place we can get what we need at this point.
Well, as you're speaking, I mean, what's resonating with me is we really aren't going to be able to achieve perfection, but what is the potential? How good could you eat?
Okay,
How much can you do? And, and sometimes despite our best efforts, I actually have a relative who is fully organic, vegan, grinds their own wheat, Berkey filter, you name it, and developed Crohn's disease. And despite every effort, exercises, you name it, just wasn't able to get it under control without, these strong medications. And so, again, just like everyone, whether we want, isn't going to be able to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. I mean, for various reasons. I mean, so I tend to look at what is the potential for, my health, your health, or my ability to change my diet and my lifestyle in a positive way. And that's sort of life's journey, right? You're never there. It's never like a destination. Okay, we're there. My diet is perfect. My exercise is perfect. My sleep is perfect. My relationships, my stress, what have you. But I think what keeps life interesting is continuing to challenge ourselves to explore that potential.
Okay, let's play there a little bit, Adam, because that's, on one hand, I want control. I want to feel like I've got power and I've got agency over my health and wellness, even though, there's nothing I can do that's going to guarantee that I don't get, cancer or Crohn's disease or something there. I hope that if it's in the cards for me that I'm delaying it, or I'm helping myself recover or something, that I am helping it, but I can't guarantee that. And when I look at issues that happen, it's really hard not to look for a causation. It's hard for me because, again, I want control. So it's hard for me to look at me getting something or somebody else and trying to figure out what let the door open. My dad died from cancer. He got 7 months ago, he got a diagnosis out of the blue for him of pancreatic cancer. And from the diagnosis till death was 6 weeks.
Oh, sorry.
And he was an inspired guy. So, I mean, if you look at the four areas that I think of with functional medicine, which I think about them. Well, you tell me. You say, because integrated functional medicine, but I think about them, as input, nutrition, output, exercise. Let's see, recovery, sleep, and then kind of the mind and body. Is
Restore.
that? Am I?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think there's different ways we could talk about it, but that covers it by and large. Yeah.
Well, if I look at that, and I look at his, I think he's doing pretty well. He's 76. He's doing pretty well. And then, he gets cancer and people just think, well, he got it. Kind of like COVID, you just caught it. Bummer, bad luck for you. And I still want to know what opened the door. Well, I happen to know his doc because it's my buddy. And, looking at his labs and stuff, he's been dealing with high cortisol for a long time. And I think it was anxiety. He had anxiety in his life. Not necessarily all worry, but he always was just kind of running high. And I look at that and think, well, that didn't help. Could he have meditated more? Could he have done some things to help offset that and help the door not to open?
Yeah.
Meet me there, because I know that's controversial.
Yeah. Well, I go back to what you said at the beginning of this piece of our discussion, which is the idea of wanting to control what you can control. And I think I'm with you on that. The issue is that there's so much we can't control, right?
Yes.
So, this popped into my head. This was a few years back. I was practicing in New Jersey. I developed an integrative program for healthcare system there about 1998. So it's going back a little bit, maybe 99, 2000. And I had this wonderful, I think he was about 98-year-old gentleman come into my office, and he looked at me and he said, Dr. Perlman, do you think I should go organic? And I kind of chuckled to myself and I said, sir, if it's in your budget and it works for you, fine. In my mind, I was thinking, here we are. He's 98, living in New Jersey, probably right next to a Superfund site, for who knows. And so there's so much we're getting exposed to. Yeah. And even though we can do interventions like I'm going to exercise right, I'm going to go organic, you can't control these forever chemicals that you might have been exposed to. Yeah. Some of these things you can detox from. You can't control what your mother might have been exposed to, or you might have been exposed to in utero. What I try to do and what I try to encourage my patients to do is to not focus on that so much. I certainly ask about it so I can understand, this is what we do in functional medicine, understand the antecedents, mediators, and triggers. And that sometimes gives people a better sense of ease. At least they understand why this may have happened. But we can't control what genes we have. However, we can influence whether certain genes get turned off or on. So then if you say, well, what should I do about that? How do I gain more control, recognizing that I can't change my genes, or the fact that I grew up in a house that had a bunch of lead paint or whatever it might have been, or I was exposed to off-gassing from something. Well, okay, then you can focus on those things that will have a positive influence, even with those other issues being a reality of your existence, let's say. And that's what really drew me to functional medicine, because with functional medicine, it's not so much about trying to treat the end stage manifestation. Now, you could say, well, I have a rash and it's itching, and I could put a cream on that, and I guess that's a certain sense of control if their itching gets better. But if I could figure out that I had some food sensitivities that was causing that rash, and then take those foods out of my diet, choose to do that or not, that gives me both a sense of control and the ability to address the issue at root cause. And I say it or not because I've had patients where we figured out that rash was caused by gluten. And I remember one patient saying, I know that's the case, but I'd prefer to keep gluten in my diet and I'll just deal with the rash. Yeah. And they have every right to make that decision, right? It's kind of, what are you comfortable with? But for me, this idea of giving patients more control, and now with Pendulum, giving consumers more control, really is what resonated with me.
Okay, well, I appreciate your grace and diplomacy with that. Since it's my show, I'll be the unpolitically correct one in that, because I saw that too when we converted this medical practice to a functional medicine practice. I'll never forget one guy, and it was kind of that same discussion. Hey, I think we could do this. You're on high blood pressure meds. We could do this to get you off of them. And the guy's like, well, I don't want to quit doing those things. I'd rather just take the meds. Okay. Well, I really struggled. And again, I'm going to count myself even more so as a novice. I'm not a doc. I'm not you. Maybe I know enough, hopefully, to be dangerous, but I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, okay, so if the med moderates his system, keeps his blood pressure down, there's still something down here making his blood pressure high. And I'm concerned, if it was me, about the long-term effects of letting that thing still happen and just bandaging the symptom. in essence. Is that fair? I still struggle with that. It bothers me.
It is fair. The only point I was trying to make with that patient who decided she would continue with gluten, that isn't what I would have chose to do. That may not be what you would have chosen to do. I didn't even really agree with the decision. But, there is sort of the ethical principles of healthcare, which people have autonomy to make decisions as they see fit for themselves. What I always try to do, I'll maybe just riff on this for a minute.
Yeah.
Just more philosophically, I see my role as facilitating people's freedom of choice.
Yeah.
The issue is if you are not operating with complete information, or if you have misinformation, that isn't really freedom of choice. If you get fully informed as much as we can, then you can decide what you feel is best for you. The problem is there's a lot of misinformation out there. And of course, the internet has been a blessing and a curse in some ways in regards to the kind of information we find. And so all that being said, particularly for the kind of things that I'm now very interested in, like whether people want to take a pendulum product or not, it's not about me convincing them. It's about me educating them. And then they have the freedom of choice to decide whether or not this is the best sort of option for them to try in this moment.
Okay, well, let's riff on misinformation. That is what I feel like our cultural battle is. It's the misinformation that what we see in the fast food restaurant or in the middle aisles of the grocery store is okay. Because it's there, because the FDA passed it, and it's apparently not going to kill us, at least not today. It's okay. That's the misinformation that frustrates me because it has become the cultural norm. Almost right across from our practice is McDonald's. They've got 2 lanes and it's just almost always full. Now I look at that and recognize that, as Michael Pollan would say, is that's not food. If you get it through the drive-through window, it's not food. If it's not going to mold, it's not food. One of the kids my kids got a hold of a Twinkie the other day and he laughed. It came in some basket or something like that. And he laughed because we have a Twinkie that my wife put on a little dish on top of a cabinet like 5 years ago. And of course, it looks the same as it did 5 years ago. And it doesn't mold. And I look, that's not food. There's no nutritional value in that food, in McDonald's food, I think for the most part, in the middle aisles of the grocery store. And yet because it's there, because it's the norm, we accept that. That to me feels like the frustrating misinformation. Fair?
Fair. I think we are seeing the downstream ramifications of that. Yeah. I think it's hard not to recognize that because so much of what we do eat is ultra processed, has high amounts of sugar, high simple carbohydrates. We're seeing this sort of epidemic of multiple chronic diseases that are often driven by these issues. And again, the connection that I know we're going to get to is really often through the microbiome and effects on the bacteria in our gut that ultimately affect things like our metabolism. And then you see diabetes and weight issues go through the roof.
Okay, well, let's hit that. And let's come back to those 4. I'm used to the functional medicine, concept of those 4 areas, nutrition, in essence, exercise, sleep, and then mind, body. So looking at those, and we've had people on the show who are sleep experts, that's their focus. And we've had some who are focused on, just the exercise and activity and movement, not being sedentary. And then a lot on mind body, whether that's meditation or, these days, of course, every other book's on anxiety because we seem to be really hurting from there. And then we've got nutrition. We've got intake. That I tend to give more focus to that for whatever reason, but I'm going to ask that for you. You've been involved. You're involved in all those areas with your patients. You're looking at all those in essence equally. And yet you have, you mentioned before when we were talking offline that in working with Duke and working with Mayo and how frustrating people get in their pursuit of health and wellness. And so it's interesting to me to hear you are, and you're now chief medical officer with Pendulum, with a company that's focused on, well, is it fair for me to put that in the nutrition category? If we look at those 4 areas you have devoted there, why?
Well, and yes, Pendulum is a company that's focused on the connection between the microbiome and human health. And so as you just stated, I was at Duke. I was running their health and wellness portfolio, including the Duke Diet Center and their integrative medicine program. And that's when I really ramped up my functional medicine training. And we're probably talking 2011-ish. That's also when I really began to appreciate the connection between gut health and the rest of our health and our well-being, and how it influences everything from longevity to whether or not we might develop certain cancers to, of course, things like diabetes and managing our weight. So I had sort of continued to refine that interest at places like Duke, and then more recently at Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida. As you might imagine, I mean, we're tertiary care facilities. What does that mean? Typically the majority of our patients have seen other healthcare providers at other institutions, and they're getting referred in. And to your point, often they come to integrative after they've been frustrated. They come to integrative and functional medicine. So that was my practice, and I often started with the gut. Hippocrates knew this thousands of years ago, or he says, that all disease starts with the gut. And what was interesting is it's a simple place in some ways to begin, because you can start to talk about diet, but the effects can be profound. The reason is that the gut is the biggest opening to the outside world. And so all day long, we need to let in friend and keep out foe. And so 70% of our immune system functions at the level of gut. And things can go awry. Why? Because people are walking across the street and eating fast food or doing other things that can influence the microbiome. So with that interest, again, doing a lot of that in my clinical practice, I was giving some lectures. I gave what was called a Grand Rounds lecture, and I think I gave a talk at a Mayo Nutrition conference on the connection between gut health and chronic disease. The CEO of Pendulum, Colleen Cutcliffe, saw that, and Mayo Ventures was an investor in the company, early investor. So she had some relationship with Mayo. Through that, reached out to me really to do a study on one of Pendulum's products, Pendulum Glucose Control, and to do a second study. They'd already done a study looking at type 2 diabetes. And I already was familiar with the product because I was using them in my practice, but that gave me a chance to work with their team, design a clinical trial, take a really deep dive into the science. And I was really impressed not only with the science, again, I was somewhat familiar with it, but with the company's commitment to the science. Wasn't really thinking of leaving Mayo Clinic. I came to Mayo in Jacksonville to build their integrative functional practice. It was going well. But the chief medical officer decided to retire. And again, I loved the team. I really appreciated the focus on science and bringing what I really considered next generation probiotics to the market. We can talk about that, of course. And so as of early January, I left Mayo. And as you've just said, I'm chief medical officer for Pendulum.
Okay, well, let's back into the product somewhat, because, okay, again, going back to food, I would like to think that I can be natural. I don't want pharmaceuticals, of course, unless I'm really broken. I don't want that. But in that sense, I don't want to take any pills in my natural, holistic approach to life. I think, no, I'm going to get what I want from, broccoli and, good food and whatnot. And then again, the frustration of realizing I can't. The nutrients that we have in the soil don't really support it. I don't know. There's certain things that I think would be good for me, but I struggle to assimilate. My body has problems because of my own brokenness. You talked about hereditary, and I do food tests. I struggle with nightshades pretty badly. They tend to cause inflammation, and
sure,
maybe from a past injury, I get that inflammation from nightshades, and it'll put my back out. And it took so long to figure that out. Took a food allergy test and realized that legumes and even green beans, eggs, all of those I'm allergic / sensitive to. I don't know when it pathologically falls over to allergies, but so I don't pursue those. Well, there's things in there, and I'm finally looking and going, how do I get what I need? And we come to nutritional supplements. Let's hit that at a high level. I literally, Adam, I was yesterday, had a kid at a dentist appointment. We had to wait, and there's a museum next door, Colorado Springs Museum. We go in there, and it's showing all these things. And there was a rack. I took a picture of it to show my buddy Randy, the MD, a rack, or this cabinet of the old tinctures and snake oil stuff, in there. I got to read these. I'm going to send them to him. It's so funny. There were literally these things. Dr. Pierce's favorite prescription tablets, take with water or any other fluid. That's the title. What the hell is that? There's another one. I like this even better. Radway's Ready Relief. Rub externally on sprains and strains, or take internally for sour stomach. Alcohol content, 27%.
I'm thinking, dude, you take enough of that, you're going to feel good from anything, just funny stuff. But
Right.
we have people, I have people who still knowing what I do, and they'll put down supplements, even as I've been a purveyor of supplements for so long, that we still, I think, have some cultural questions on it. Does it really help us, especially when you have somebody like a lot of my listeners and me, they are exercising well. They're eating pretty clean. They know the value of their sleep, and they're working on their mind-body connection, and they feel okay, but they want to be optimal. They want to, as you said, fulfill their fullest potential. And so a guy like me, I take my supplements, and I take them a lot out of faith, because I don't have a specific supplement that if I take it, I just levitate and feel like $1 million. Or if I don't take it, I just can't get out of bed. I'm taking them on faith. Now, you can usually look at labs, I think, and see the differences there. But talk to us on that. Just it feels like it's an ongoing battle sometimes.
Well, without a doubt. And sometimes people can have difficulty managing a particular issue. Let's say cravings as an example. They just can't manage it, and they think they lack willpower. Something else is going on. And it can be more related to issues with the biological systems. And so maybe I'll use an example. I think that'll be the clearest with your listeners. And I think I'll use the example of metabolic health, and I'll explain what that is. But 1 in 3 Americans, I believe I'm saying this, 1 in 3, 1 in 4 have metabolic syndrome. But almost 90% of Americans adults have at least one sign of metabolic dysfunction. What does that mean? Some elevated blood pressure or triglycerides, or a little bit of elevated fasting glucose, or some insulin resistance, or their waist is a little bigger than it should be. So these are very common. And of course, when you get a number of these issues kind of coming together, then people get diagnosed with this condition called metabolic syndrome. Again, it's a lot of kind of either pre-diabetes or diabetes. People are often overweight, but not necessarily. And so you look at that issue, it's like, well, all right, I just need to eat better. I need to exercise, and I'll get it under control. Maybe. But how does metabolism really work in the body? And what is metabolism? It's, in a simplified way, our body's ability to take food and turn it into energy, take the nutrients we need and provide the energy that we need for our bodies. That actually happens when we eat a meal, of course, but it happens through specific strains of bacteria in our gut. This is what we now understand. Again, this 70 to 100 trillion bacteria in our gut that's often referred to as the microbiota or microbiome, which refers to the genetic material in it. Again, we won't geek out for your audience, but we've evolved with these bacteria. We couldn't live without them. We're sort of, they want to keep us healthy. We need to keep them healthy, whether we're aware of it or not. Okay. And many things can influence the health of our microbiome. Poor diet, stress, medications that we may be taking. Sometimes we need to, sometimes we may not need to take them. Things someone might not think of. I mean, running an ultramarathons influences gut health, and people can develop what's called endotoxemia, or what the lay public often knows as leaky gut. Traumatic brain injuries can influence the makeup of our microbiome. So many things can influence the microbiome, and it's kind of under assault a lot in our current modern day lifestyle. So what happens then? In the case of metabolic health, what happens is we eat a meal, specific strains of bacteria, in particular strains like akkermansia that I know we're going to get into.
Yep.
They eat that meal, in particular fiber and whatnot. They then release these signaling molecules that trigger cells in the lining of our gut to release this very important hormone that we're all hearing about nowadays called GLP-1, right? GLP-1 hormone is the hormone in a synthetic form that we see in the drugs like semaglutide that people are injecting into themselves, right? That's, what is it now? 12% of Americans have tried or are on or something like that. What GLP-1 does is it's often referred to as the unhunger hormone. So you eat a meal, the bacteria really eat that meal. They then release chemicals, short chain fatty acids, other things that then bind to receptors on these cells in the gut. You release GLP-1. GLP-1 goes to your pancreas, tells your pancreas, make insulin. This person just ate a meal. We don't want their sugar to go too high. It goes to your gut and triggers a slowing down of your digestion so that you can absorb the nutrients, so that you can feel more full. And it travels up the vagus nerve to your brain, to the areas of your brain that trigger satiety, trigger us feeling full, and say, hey, have this guy stop eating or have this person stop eating. So it's really important. And when we have an imbalance of the bacteria in our gut, strains like akkermansia or other Clostridium butyricum, other strains, that system potentially isn't functioning the way that it should. When you then take supplements and adjust your lifestyle, but the supplement piece to try to address that issue, you might not see that immediate throwing of a switch like you would if you had a headache and you took, a bunch of Tylenol, right? Because what we're doing here is we're working at the level of the biological system.
Yeah.
In the long run, what you're doing is restoring balance to that ecosystem so that it functions the way that it should, so that the cravings aren't out of control at 10 o'clock at night, or despite your best efforts, you can't figure out why your doctor told you your fasting glucose is still elevated, things of that nature.
Okay. Yeah.
And I said a lot there.
No, it's great. Because for me, I haven't taken anything, and it's just all of a sudden I feel great or whatnot, but I'll see it in my labs. So we do these advanced diagnostics, as you know, that we do in functional medicine and integrative medicine, and see that I'm really lacking over here, or especially a poop test, these days, and go, oh my gosh, you have 0 of these necessary bacteria. And then over time, taking supplements, then I see that, level out and increase. And that's where I came to with you guys. So you mentioned already akkermansia. I had never heard of it, Adam. I literally, and I felt frustrated because I kind of think I'm an expert in all this stuff. Apparently not. And I looked it up and I came across the video of Mark Hyman, who I'm a fan of. I mean, he's, got to be one of the biggest names in functional and integrative medicine these days, huge podcasts and all that. And it's a video with him and your CEO. You mentioned her name again. What was her name?
Colleen Cutcliffe. Colleen.
Right. And him saying that he was having a problem. I think he had C. diff or something, and did a poop test and came out, and it says he has no akkermansia. And then he couldn't find a source for it. So he kind of created and crafted his own smoothie, I think. And over time, then he was able to get that. Am I saying it right? Get that bacteria back in there, in essence?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not sure. I know the story, but I don't remember exactly what Mark might have put in his smoothie. But I do remember
I don't know
that
what he put in it, but he was able to increase the akkermansia. Yeah. And now here you guys come out, and of course that's why he's a fan of you guys. He's saying, well, now I just take I take the Pendulum product to get that in there. But that's the kind of stuff that bothers me, of going, okay, I can pay attention to what I'm getting in, but what am I assimilating and what am I missing that I don't know about based on my own, I don't know what, pathology and different lacks and whatnot. And here I am totally, here he is as Mark Hyman. I mean, he's like the guru here, and he's missing this one and suffering from it. So how many of us are missing akkermansia? Again, I didn't even know the word.
Right. Well, and don't feel bad you didn't know the word, because I've often said that our understanding of the connection between gut health and these specific strains of bacteria and how they influence various disease states or conditions is kind of the next great frontier of medicine. It's evolving very rapidly as our ability to study the bacteria is advanced. So what do I mean by that? I'm sure you've heard, or your listeners have heard, of things like lactobacillus or bifidobacterium. These are what we typically, would see in a probiotic product. And they are, by and large, aerobic, so you can grow them in a petri dish. What Pendulum did, and the company's been around for 12 years. They've only had a product on the market for 3, give or take, because they spent the early years really studying this connection between the microbiome. And it was founded by people like Colleen, who's, a PhD microbiologist, that kind of thing, and, studied at Hopkins. And they were studying this connection. And what they really got intrigued about and focused on was some of the anaerobic bacteria. These are bacteria that cannot be exposed to oxygen because oxygen would kill them. And the bacteria that by and large live in the large intestine, the colon, sort of the distal area where there isn't oxygen or much oxygen. And then they really, again, within that area, focused in on these specific next generation strains. And they're called next generation because they aren't the typical probiotics that you would have seen on the shelf, just a few years ago. But they have profound effects in the body. They're often referred to as keystone strains. In the case of akkermansia, again, as I was just describing, it is a critical player in allowing your body to respond appropriately to a meal. and allow you to feel full and your glucose not to spike, and allow you to maintain better metabolic health. And, we've studied that. Again, we go back to, we've talked a lot about misinformation. What I tell my patients, my friends, my family is you need to focus on the science. The science is not always rock solid. Science is not typically, right? I mean, there's gray areas in science at times, and it's about probabilities. You're more likely to have a better outcome here. In the case of akkermansia, and Pendulum studied some other strains, they actually combined 5 synergistic strains in this Pendulum glucose control product. And then they studied it in people who had type 2 diabetes who were on metformin by and large. And going back to what we were talking about earlier, here's a diabetics on one of the number one drugs for diabetes, this drug metformin. Some people are taking it just for longevity, and despite that, it's not unusual that people's control of their glucose may not be ideal. And what we saw in this randomized controlled study was that there was a 33% improvement in what are called glucose spikes if you're wearing a continuous glucose monitor. So just think of it as control of your glucose so it doesn't go too high. And a significant improvement at 0.6, that probably won't mean much to most of your listeners, but in the main metric that we look at for diabetes, which is hemoglobin A1C. And so here we are with patients who are on one of the leading drugs, kind of suboptimally managed. But when you come in with a product like one of Pendulum's probiotics, it's really affecting the biological system in a different way. And so they're working synergistically to help people achieve the outcome that they had difficulty achieving before.
Well, and I looked at that again. I started researching akkermansia, and it says, here, I think I've pulled out some bullet points. It helps improve metabolism, metabolizing sugars and carbs, helps converting food into more energy, giving sustained energy levels, which that piqued my interest because again, I feel like I am in general eating so well, and yet I'll have times of low energy. I feel like my sleep, I monitor my sleep scores with a wearable device, and I'll have times of feeling like I should have more energy. I'll be really frustrated on a workout I'm doing and feel like I'm not there. And other times when I feel like I'm rocking, and I don't like the instability of it. I want to have it more consistent. So the next one was lowering glucose spikes and A1C, strengthen gut lining, which I worry about with myself, and then stimulating GLP-1 production. Did I get the main highlight?
Yeah. Okay. Let me touch on a few of the points that I hadn't touched on yet, because I talked about the GLP-1 piece and how akkermansia did that. But you mentioned the energy piece, and I'll just give one comment there, which is for some people, particularly if it's sort of what we call postprandial, after you eat a meal, you feel that kind of slump. Sometimes that's the sugar going high and then it's coming down. It's sort of crashing. That's ideally what, taking some of these strains will help control, because you won't get those same levels of spikes in your glucose levels.
I got to say, I hate that one. I mean, I just, especially if I'm here at the office,
Don't we all?
I've got stuff I'm doing and we eat, and afterwards, if I feel that, I'd almost rather not eat. I don't even want to deal with it. So, and I do probably once every couple of weeks, Adam, I'll do that. I need to be food journaling or something and try to pay more attention. But, so that has, I don't like that one. So keep going.
Yeah. And again, there can be many reasons why we have low energy at any point in the day, right? But that is one that we might not have thought of, and we may think is not within our control, but it is if we can influence the biological system by taking the right probiotic. I think the other one you mentioned was strengthening the gut lining. So let me just take a moment to explain that. I think earlier in the podcast, I talked a little bit about the lining of the gut, but let me explain it more for your listeners.
Leaky gut, I read about leaky that gut so much, and I would say I worry about that. Yeah.
So if any of my patients are watching your podcast, they'll know this talk, this little mini lecture very well, because I talked to all my patients about it. If you think about the lining of the gut, Colleen, like our CEO, likes to talk about it like the fence in her backyard, where the boards kind of line up. And you want to hold those boards tight together. And there's sort of some really glue that does that, some proteins that help hold the boards together. But there's also like this shellac on the outside of the fence that helps to keep the wood healthy, and also helps to keep the integrity of that fence so that things that shouldn't get through can't get through. In the case of our bodies, that shellac is something called mucin, kind of a sticky, it acts almost like flypaper, catching inflammatory particles and pieces of bacteria and proteins from foods that are too large and shouldn't get through the boards of the fence, it catches them. So we want that mucin layer to be healthy so that the integrity of that gut lining can be healthy. Akkermansia, our strain, the full name, Akkermansia mucinophilia, is mucin loving. What it actually does is like a Pac-Man. It actually lives and kind of feeds on that mucin layer. It eats the degraded mucin, and then it stimulates these cells in the lining of the gut called goblet cells, just for the listeners that are interested, but to actually make more mucin. So it basically eats the old stuff and causes more fresh mucin to be laid down. So it really helps to maintain that lining of the gut. Why is that important? When we have increased intestinal permeability, which makes me sound a little more like a doctor, but most people say leaky gut, things get in. And when they get in, that causes an immune reaction. There are immune cells that kind of grab on and they say, this isn't supposed to be here. They present these antigens, this complex forms. They present these particles to other immune cells, and that causes the immune system to sort of turn on, and release other immune cells to help deal with the stuff that shouldn't be there. Those immune cells that get released are pro-inflammatory cells, and this is happening in the blood. So what I like to explain is that inflammation can manifest anywhere. So I love this story of when I was at Mayo, I would get a fair amount of referrals from our headache doctors. And I remember getting a referral once, and in the referral, the doctor literally put, referring to Dr. Perlman, to address neuroinflammation. And he knew that I was going to be focusing on this patient's diet, the issue of leaky gut, and we don't know exactly how to heal it, but we know that healthier diets influence it. We know certain supplements can be influential. He knew I was going to be taking a focus on the gut, and here he was referring a headache patient. But he got this concept that when the gut lining and the makeup of the bacteria isn't right, it can affect inflammation even as far off as up in the brain.
Well, and that's, So let's talk about, you mentioned the strain, and you mentioned, obviously, you work with Pendulum. I mean, you are an advocate of that strain. I'm taking those as well. I had to learn that with supplements, and not all supplements are made the same. And there are some, when you look at the myriad, people are used to hearing, again, probiotics and fish oil or omegas and, vitamin D and whatever, all the different ones out there. My understanding is some of them it's more important to get the highest grade possible. I mean, you could say all of them are, but that some, it's not as, I don't know if that's fair to say. Maybe vitamin D, it's not so important. You can get it off the shelf, whatever. My feeling was really omegas and probiotics are kind of the high end of, if you get crap, it's almost not worth getting. Don't even do it. Is that fair?
Yes, I would say for the listeners that are not watching this on a video, they couldn't see how much I smiled when you said vitamin D. I use that as an example all the time. Like, I'm less worried about the quality there. Maybe we'll get letters from your listeners saying you should worry. I don't know, but I'm typically less worried.
Go out in the sun.
But right. So I do think it's really important to look at the quality of certain types. And this is what I tell my patients as well. I would agree with you. Omega-3 is definitely one of them. I think CoQ10 is another one. Any supplements where bioavailability is certainly a concern, the ability of that supplement to get into the blood and into the cells and where it needs to be. And obviously probiotics are one of them. I mean, what I left out of the story with Pendulum, that again was, to me, part of what, allowed me to sort of jump ship from Mayo was, they actually, when they figured out that some of these next generation strains, and again, it's not akkermansia alone. We'll get into that because they work synergistically. But when they decided to bring them to market, they actually spent millions of dollars to build a plant in San Francisco to manufacture the products. And so, they do the R&D, they do the manufacturing, and of course they commercialize. And so we're really, really attuned to the quality of the products. And these products are very difficult to grow because, again, they cannot be exposed to oxygen. So bringing products like akkermansia, like Clostridium butyricum to market is challenging because the production's more expensive. You have to know how to handle them. In our case, because we need for them to get down to the lower intestine, they had to figure out this plant-based, acid-resistant, delayed release capsule so it gets down to where it needs to get to. And all of that is critical. I mean, if you take something that just gets eaten up in the stomach, that's not what you want either. So a focus on that and the quality of products is definitely a key consideration.
Okay, I want to dig more into that. And I did have the benefit. I had a supplement company, man, 5 or 6 years ago, flew us up and we got to do a tour and it blew my mind. I mean, it was, closed off, people in lab coats and masks and what I had no idea what goes into an actual high quality. I kind of ended up referring to them as like professional quality, supplements. But yeah, looking at probiotics, my feeling has been, and Omega specifically, has been since then of it's kind of like getting a chair. And if you're going to get a chair made out of balsa wood, don't even bother. You're just going to fall through it. It's just a waste of money. If you're going to get a chair, get a steel chair or metal or wood chair, whatever. That's what it was like here. So if I'm going to take a probiotic, I'm going to spend the money. I'm going to get a good probiotic. And you talked about the strains, and I don't know if you want to educate us a little bit on the strains, what's the value there. But my focus has always been the strains. And then I learned also about, I guess the best way to say it is the formulation. Is that relevant with the probiotics? I know it is with like the omegas, that how it's formulated and whatever can matter to how much, again, you're able to assimilate.
Yeah. And so maybe I'll try to explain it this way, maybe to keep it. I think the best example would be our newest product, which is a product called GLP-1 probiotic. Yeah. So that has 3 strains in it. It has the akkermansia strain that, again, does all the things we just talked about. It has a strain.
To my understanding, it hardly exists elsewhere or
Pendulum
anywhere.
is the only company that provides to the marketplace live akkermansia. You can find pasteurized, and that's important for your listeners to be aware of. You want to look carefully at the label. Pasteurized means dead. It's technically not a probiotic because a probiotic is a live organism. It's technically a postbiotic. And again, I'm not saying that it can't have any effects physiologically in the body, but if you want the full effects of akkermansia, in my opinion, you want to take a live product. So live akkermansia, Clostridium butyricum. So what that does, I guess what I left out of the akkermansia story, I said that there were, in response to a meal, akkermansia releases these short-chain fatty acids. I think I called them like signaling chemicals. The main one is called butyrate, okay? Right. And again, just keeping this simplified. So butyrate is what actually binds to these receptors in the lining of the gut called L cells. It then triggers the release of GLP-1. So we've talked about that. So you want more butyrate. Butyrate's very important in the body for metabolic health. It's a major fuel for the cells that line the gut, the enterocytes. So it's a very important short-chain fatty acid sort of chemical that we want. Clostridium butyricum is also a next-generation strain that primarily makes butyrate. And so you see this synergistic effect. And that's the way the microbiome works. It's a complex ecosystem where there's like any community, there's a lot of good players and there's some bad players, and the good players, they work together, maybe sometimes even the bad players too, but you're trying to run a town, right? I mean, you're this community. And so everyone's got to pitch in, and there's some overlap of responsibilities and roles so that if you did have no akkermansia, it's not like the whole system goes haywire. There are other strains that can jump in and try to pick up the slack, even if it's not going to be quite as efficient. And so when you have akkermansia with Clostridium butyricum, because people may be low in that, you're going to get more effect, more release of butyrate, better control of metabolic health. The third is something called Bifidobacterium infantis. And this is something that, historically pediatricians may think about more. It's very important early in life, but it actually does continue to have a role in the human body throughout our life, as far as we know. And it's what's called a primary fermenter. So it sort of makes other short-chain fatty acids, or let's say fuel for other bacteria. So again, you've got these 3 working together, supporting each other, so you can have a more efficient biological system, manage your glucose, in this case, manage your cravings. Now, the point I wanted to make, if you'll let me drone on here for just a moment more.
No, please. I'm curious.
Well, because you were talking about the formulation and this and that, and I think sometimes people get in their head, well, the more they put into the bottle, the better, or the highest dose or the most number of strains. And, in the human body, in nature, more isn't necessarily better. You may be aware of, but, too much water can kill you. Yeah. I mean, there's actually, there's a condition called psychogenic polydipsia where people drink too much water. They dilute their electrolytes and can have all kinds of serious health problems. So too much of anything is not good. What we want is the right mix, the right amount that's going to be effective. again, maybe kind of a principle of nature. When you go higher and higher, you risk more and more of side effects. And so what you want to see is not only did a company take the time to do the basic science, take the time to make sure the manufacturing was appropriate. You don't want adulterants. You want to make sure you're getting the shelf life is what it should be. But then also takes the time to do research to show that their products actually make a difference, because that's the kicker, right? That's the kicker. So in the case of GLP-1, I've already talked about the other research we did. In the case of GLP-1, we did a study, a consumer study, 274 consumers. And this was interesting. We actually were looking at cravings. So we measured their baseline cravings. We gave them this 3-strain formulation, GLP-1 probiotic, for 3 months. We're still finishing up analysis on the 3-month data, but at 6 weeks, what we found, so halfway through, that 91% of participants had a significant reduction in cravings. And there was a few interesting caveats there. The higher your cravings at baseline, the more of a reduction you saw. So that's important. People are really, really struggling. They may have even more of an effect. The other was that I hadn't worked with this food cravings inventory in the past. It was an interesting survey tool that actually looks at 4 different areas. So it looks at like sugars and sweets. It looks like carbs and starches, carbs. It looks at high fat foods, and it looks at like fast food, fats. So 4 different areas. And each one of those areas, there were, almost 80+ % of participants had significant reductions. So, we're following that up. We've actually launched a much more robust study that literally we've just started maybe a week ago enrolling with subjects. And so I'm really excited. We're doing this in 2 phases. I'm hoping we'll have some early readout on this within a few months, and then a more robust phase 2. So, that's the kind of commitment you want to see, from any supplement company that's bringing products to market.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm smiling too, because I had the privilege of going through a few years so when my buddy Randy, the medical doctor and functional medicine expert, he would have, it was interesting as time went on, the drug reps didn't come see him anymore, because he's not prescribing anything. He's not prescribing, pharmaceuticals for the most part, but supplement companies, they're banging on the door. So he'd go sit down. So I'd go join him, if nothing else, because they always brought, free sushi or something like that. So join him. And that's where he would often hit him. Tell me the research. Tell me the studies. And so often there just weren't any. It was, based on good faith in essence, and they try to prove the efficacy and talk about this, but the studies weren't there. So I say that in appreciation of hearing what you guys are doing, because it feels like even with some of the top supplement companies, there's not enough testing being done to cite. Fair? Yeah.
Very fair. And again, in my role at Pendulum is largely twofold. I mean, again, half of it is doing this, along with Colleen does a lot of sort of podcasts. I think you said you saw her on, forget what you said. You saw her on Mark Hyman. Sorry, Mark Hyman.
Yeah,
I was going to say
biggest
Peter. You saw Mark Hyman, right? So I do this, but then the other half, and probably even the majority of my time, is overseeing our clinical science. I don't do the R&D side of it. And I would even add another caveat in terms of what we're talking about here and the level of evidence. What we're now looking to do, what we're doing with this GLP-1 study, what we're doing with our Pendulum glucose control product, is we're funding studies that are being done outside of the company at other institutions. So we are funding, trying to get it up and launched. We're very close, a study to repeat that study I mentioned about the diabetics who are on metformin. Yeah. Now we want to do that at Mayo Clinic, larger cohort of individuals. Mayo does the study. Similarly, the GLP-1 study is done working with a principal investigator, another institution. So we have a somewhat of a hands-off. I mean, we help design the protocols, of course, but you have these independent institutions and organizations that are then running studies and, again, validating the evidence that we've seen internally by and large. And I think that's important, that companies go that next step of say, okay, we're actually going to do this and we're going to do it with other institutions, okay, that are going to show that the evidence is really strong and solid here. What's also fun for me, just as a quick FYI, is we have, a number of studies that we're the sponsors, as you say, we're really funding, but we have probably almost a dozen studies where we're just primarily providing products. So there are a lot of investigators really around the world that are interested in studying strains like akkermansia, like Clostridium. And so we'll just provide product for them, typically free of charge. Like we'll just provide the product so that they can investigate. We have studies going on where investigators are looking at bone health, studies looking at mental health issues, all kinds of things, cancer-related studies. So there's all kinds of very interesting potential applications down the road. And I go back to that, this area of the connection between the microbiome and human health really being one of the next great frontiers in terms of our understanding and our approach to the treatment of chronic diseases and the prevention of those diseases.
Yeah. Well, and you said something a minute ago, and I wrote down in my notes, that we can, with stuff like this, I want the best case. I want to give myself the best opportunity. You start off talking about potential. And, if I'm going to go, I don't know why I thought about fishing. I haven't fished in years, but if I'm going to go fishing, I'm going to ask, what are the locals? What are they biting? I don't want to sit there and waste an hour throwing in something that the fish are not eating right now. And in that, with myself, I want to figure out what is going to give me the best chance to perform well, to be at my best, to have, my gosh, my job, I think like yours, it's creative. I don't sit here just pulling a lever all day in a factory. It's creative. I've got to be able to think critically and think creatively. And if I am not full of energy and vibrant, I just can't do it. So with this, it's interesting though, Adam, so I'm going to cite again my buddy Randy. So he's a medical doctor. He's been involved with functional medicine for so many years, but he's in treating patients and he's trying to give them the best chance. He is not in a facility, a lab like, you and your folks are studying these strains and figuring it out. So what's he doing? He knows a lot and he's talking with supplement companies, but he's ultimately looking to people like you. So I literally asked him when I first got wind of you guys, I asked him about the concept of, akkermansia first. He said, oh yeah, it's big. And I was surprised I hadn't heard it from him yet. And then mentioned your name. And he says, oh yeah, I know him. And Pendulum. And he said, yeah, well, again, if you guys are the only one providing akkermansia, then chances are. And it comes down to trust. That's where in this age right now, you talk about podcasting, and I feel like that's what is promoting advertising on podcasting is because people are looking for trust because we're not on the front lines figuring out COVID and whether we should have a vaccine or not. We're looking to people we trust, and we're not on the front lines of figuring out what strains are going to assimilate in our bodies with a probiotic. And so we're looking, which again matters that Mark Hyman's there saying, yeah, you guys are my source for probiotics, but specifically, and then akkermansia. And then, of course, you've got people like, Halle Berry, the actress and whatnot that are doing that. And she's known for health and wellness and stuff as well. But we ultimately are looking to folks like you who came over from the Mayo Clinic and saying, okay, what is going to give us the best chance to have the best health? Not perfect. You mentioned that at the beginning too. We can't have perfect health. My buddy Randy says we can't all be perfectly well, but we can all get weller. We can give ourselves a better chance, which is what we're talking about here.
Yeah. I think you have to believe that potential exists. I was having a conversation with a patient just today earlier on this. I still have a limited clinical practice and they had lost hope. They had gotten to a place where they felt the way it is now, and there's some shoulder and back pain and fatigue and some other issues. And they'd seen so many different physicians that they really had gotten to this place where they had lost hope. And I believe in my heart and in my brain that this person can feel better. We just need to find the right road. Going back to what I said earlier, it may not be, this is a woman in this case, it may not be in her future to climb Mount Kilimanjaro because that may be too much on her at her age and where she's at. But what is her potential to feel as good as she can feel? And if we think about that often from the perspective of the biological system, so we're not just throwing a pill at every symptom that's coming up, often we can really help people to achieve, again, a new level of vitality that they just couldn't achieve otherwise. The Halle Berry story is an interesting one, by the way. I don't
know.
Curious.
I know she's an advocate, you guys. What's her story? I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of, Halle Berry, did we just kind of pay her to do like advertisements for us? No, she actually. I
figure there's enough people wanting her to, paying her to promote anything that she's not going to unless she believes it.
Right, sure. So, as I understand it, she's told the story. She tells this publicly because I would never say this if she hadn't already put it out there. But she's well-known. She developed diabetes. She obviously is in phenomenal shape, right? But she, for whatever reason, probably genetic things like that, right? Of course, she developed diabetes a number of years ago and gets her care at the Cleveland Clinic. And we have a relationship with the Cleveland Clinic as well, as a company, and collaborate with them in various ways. And so I believe this is accurate. This is what I remember from the story. Her physician at the Cleveland Clinic, she was on medication for the diabetes, but again, suboptimal, kind of wasn't getting the results she wanted. And her physician was familiar with our product, the Pendulum Glucose Control in this case, recommended she go on it, and she got remarkable results. She got much better management of her glucose. She actually reached out to Colleen and said, I want to learn more, and ended up, being a, spokesperson for the company, and really believes in what we're doing, and saw that in her own personal life. And that's that's the proof that in my opinion is most powerful. Like, how does it influence you? Everyone's going to have a different reaction to these sorts of interventions. But you first need to believe there's a potential out there. Then you need to understand what options may be available for you. And in the case of gut health, and certainly if it's metabolic health, controlling cravings, these sorts of things, some of these next generation probiotics are certainly an option. And then you try it and you see how your body responds.
Well, and I'm taking it. I'm not 3 months in. I'm barely 6 weeks even, I think. Okay. And I mean, I'm always doing so many things, and I look at it and go, gosh, I'm kind of feeling good, lately, and I'm going to go with it. But at the end of the day, I am just going to trust as well. It's still a faith. I know with supplements that they often are costly. Not everybody feels some big thing. I do them because there's just too many people that I trust and revere that are citing them. And I've gotten to see my long-term advanced diagnostics, and to see my labs, and to see things start shoring up. And, you talked about, you may not be able to jump as high as you could at 20 or whatnot, but I don't know what age you are. I'm 53, and I want to do as much as I can, as long as I can. And I want to be the guy who could today, drop down and do however many push-ups and pull-ups. And I want to be, that's what I got to do. I know if I'm going to be the 90-year-old who can still do them as well. And the supplements are part of my regime.
Well, I turned 58 yesterday.
Okay.
5 kids.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you. 5 kids. And I'll be going to I left martial arts for a while, came back to it. So I'll be going to my Krav Maga class tonight that I got into about 3 or 4 years ago. So, and, feel good. And, I think it's a journey. It's our journey. Right. Yeah. And so along the way, we educate ourselves, we gain some insight, and then we have some choice and we act. I mean, like you talk about actions, beliefs, behaviors, right? And so, that's how I live my life.
Well, likewise, man, thank you for being here, Adam, and just helping my own education. And, I'm a client and, intend to be long-term. I want the best that's out there. And especially with something you guys are providing that's not even out there otherwise. I'm grateful. So I'll be presenting it to my family and my friends. And I know that Randy's talking about it now as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's carrying Pendulum here in the practice before long too. So Thanks for the information. Thanks for what you guys are doing. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really, really enjoyed this, and hopefully your listeners got some information that will be helpful for them.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for joining us on this drive. Again, that's Dr. Adam Perlman, and the company that he's chief medical officer of now, and the products that we were talking about, akkermansia and GLP-1 probiotic. You can get 20% off if you want to try them out. I'm taking them right now myself. And go to pendulumlife.com/drivesyou. pendulum life.com/drivesyou. Got a comment, question on anything that we talked about? Feel free to let me know. And if it's for Dr. Perlman, I can get it to him. Email me at kmiller@kevinmiller.co. Until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further through the wellness in your body. And most of all, enjoy the ride.
Thanks so much for joining me on this journey. I look forward to meeting you in the Drive Tribe community for ongoing discussions about each episode. You can subscribe to the Drive Drop newsletter for weekly updates. Find it all at kevinmiller.co, along with all our social media and video clips. Until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further and enjoy the ride.